going to go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to go ahead and give the medical disclaimer. So the information provided is for educational purposes and is not intended as medical advice or a substitute for medical advice of a physician or other qualified healthcare professional. We do not aim to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease, and you should always consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. And this information presented today has not been evaluated by the FDA or any other medical body. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Dr. Dori Naerbo, and I am your host on today's call. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a clinical researcher and an author of several books. So welcome to our, I always say the product Q&A call. We're going to have to change that because we never actually do that. We always have a new topic every time. So I'm with, of course, Clayton Thomas, who is the chairman and the founder of Root. Clayton has over 25 years of experience in the health and wellness industry. And of those 16 years, he's been focused on detoxification and nutraceutical formulations, has a simple philosophy, cure the cause. Hello, Clayton, and welcome to our Tuesday call.
Happy Tuesday.
Great.
So, my favorite question, what's on the menu?
Oh, you're going to like this. This is really good and of interest to everyone. Today, we are going to talk about the airline's dirty little secrets. Fume events, bleed air, aerotoxicity, and what we can do to protect ourselves. But first, I'm going to go ahead and recap our call from last week. I just have to do a shout out to Claire because we worked really hard on these slides. And of course, Angel Brain helped to contribute a lot to this deck today.
I gotta give her a shout out before too, because of what she's done with her nonprofit. And honestly, with everything I've learned on this subject, much of that has come from her experience. And we'll probably get into that a little bit, but to know how many people have really been hurt by this, and I think many people don't even comprehend the level of it. So I'm getting excited just from the intro because this is a fun subject.
Mm-hmm. I'll pass that on to her.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and recap last week's call. And last week we talked about collagen and how Clean Slate ticks all the same boxes as collagen. We learned about how Clean Slate is instrumental as a precursor to the production of collagen in our bodies. And you don't need to add other toxicities derived from collagen products, addition by subtraction, as Clayton says. All right, Clayton?
Absolutely.
So this is our topic today, Aerotoxic Syndrome. Aerotoxic Syndrome, fact or fiction? So exposure to emissions from cabin air, whether polluted or not, is associated with certain health risks. And this phenomenon is known as aerotoxic syndrome or cabin contamination. So scientists from France, Australia, and a US doctor were the first to identify aerotoxic syndrome in 1999. The hidden illness is known to affect the central nervous system, the brain, and it causes a range of acute symptoms and long-term health effects, and in approximately 30% of all flyers. So you can also find papers published as early as the 1950s by military and industry researchers in the US concerning engine oil fumes that were reported. So unaware, thousands of people suffer every day without knowing about this hidden health and safety hazard. As I said before, we got permission from Angel to go ahead and show this clip.
We have a mist and possibly smoke in the cabin.
Yeah, fume in the cockpit.
1695, Mayday.
We have smoke. Request reclearance for relanding, please.
Seabird 718, we have a fume event in the cockpit. We would either like an immediate approach into Zurich.
We have some smoke and bad odor in the cabin, and we need to come back to JFK. We are declaring emergency.
I do understand that smoke has gotten a little bit worse in the cabin there. We are getting priority handling into San Francisco. We should have you on the ground here very shortly.
6 Bravo. Group 6 Bravo, go ahead.
What's with fumes, toxic gas type fumes?
Roger. And there is some kind of intoxication with about 11 crew members and a few passengers. You will need some ambulances on the ground in Vancouver.
Yes, thank you. There was a kind of intoxicating fume smell on the aircraft.
Pilots confirm the alarming rise of events.
We do have fume events on a daily basis.
Eyewitnesses give dramatic testimonies of events they've encountered.
Mein erster Gedanke war eigentlich, so fühlt es sich an, wie wenn man vergast wird.
Toxicologists are concerned.
These are harmful compounds.
Organophosphate were originally made essentially to kill, and to kill essentially humans because they were made as nerve gases.
It's an issue with the design of jet engines and the way aircraft cabins are pressurized. It's one that should have remained one of the industry's best-kept secrets. Most passengers are not aware that the air they breathe aboard flights comes straight out of the engines and that this air can be toxic. But the industry hesitates to say exactly which chemicals are released and inhaled during what's called a fume event.
They know they will have to deal with it, but they're trying to buy themselves time.
Okay. Well, birds fly by pushing air. And here's another example of one of the greatest machines that pushes air. And so to understand what we're talking about, we have to look at the engine. So jet engines suck air in the front, and the air goes into a compressor, like many fans join together. And each fan gets smaller and smaller as the blades squeeze the air into a tighter and tighter space, compressing the air like squeezing a balloon, until that squeezed air is mixed with jet fuel to create super gasoline. And we have forward thrust and liftoff. Well, most engines also provide pressurized breathing air for cabin air. And this air is bled off from the compressor stages within the turbine, which is called bleed air. So here's a little schematic here. And as you can see here, the fan blades are here. And remember how I said they get smaller and smaller until the air is compressed, so much so that this is what's going to give the thrust. So it would be like, for example, on your car, like when you have air conditioning. When you engage the air conditioner, that is going to create a drag on your engine. So you're going to use more fuel, more energy to drive forward. And the same principle is with this, is in terms of how this mechanism works with bleed air. So the fan blades are constantly rotating, and it needs special lubricant. It needs synthetic engine oil. So you can imagine, like on the fan there, that between each fan, they have to have seals, and those seals and bearings and everything, they need to be lubricated. So they use synthetic engine oil. And this is a high performance oil and under tremendous heat. And whenever thrust is increased or decreased in small amounts, sometimes this special carbon seals may leak and enter into the airstream. The intense heat of the engine begins to burn and pyrolyze these particles. And these particles travel through the air ducts with the compressed air in the into the cabin. So you can see here that these little particles here are starting to leak. They become pyrolyzed through the heat, and then they start going up through here through the air conditioning system, where it's mixed and cooled and circulated through the cabin. What about cabin air filters? It's a big question, right? Why don't they do something about that? Well, Lufthansa asked Boeing for air sensors, and they didn't get them, and they're still waiting. And in 2015, they asked Boeing they wanted it on this new feature, 777X jets air sensors, and Lufthansa thought that monitoring the air was necessary to detect fume events. And this was actually shown in an internal memo. And the memo noted that Lufthansa had health concerns about the contaminated air and worried about the disruption and extensive maintenance. And Boeing refused to give Lufthansa these air sensors. To date, there's no reliable or accurate real-time sensor for detecting contaminant bleed air validated for use in commercial aircraft. Its own expert said something else to the contrary in a deposition. So a fume event is smoke that occurs when bleed air is used for cabin pressurization and and the air conditioning in pressurized aircrafts when they're contaminated by fluids such as engine oil, hydraulic fluids, or de-icing fluids, and other potentially hazardous chemicals. And these types of chemicals are a cocktail of fumes or organophosphates. And this is actually the same as sarin gas. And sarin gas is it's a nerve agent, right? It's extremely toxic. It is a synthetic compound. It's colorless, odorless, and it's used as a chemical weapon due to the extreme potency, again, as a nerve agent. So these are just examples of news events, fume events that were actually recorded by passengers. So bleed air, just so you know, is not filtered or monitored. In the event of fumes or smoke on an aircraft, flight deck crew will wear pressurized oxygen masks and or protective eyewear if available. However, there's no protection for the passengers. And as cabin oxygen masks are not intended to protect you against fume events, you can't use them anyways if you're up 30,000 feet. You need to drop. You have to depressurization needs to occur first. And 1 in 2,000 flights is actually recorded as a fume event. Completely unrecorded invisible fumes leak into the cabin on almost every flight. You don't have to have smoke to have an event. So how many times have you gotten on the plane and thought, who took off their shoes? Nobody? I'm
often that dude.
Well, I must have like a super sensitive nose, because like as soon as I smell that, I'd like, oh, that's like so irritating. So then now I'm thinking like, wow, maybe that isn't really that. Maybe it's actually a fume event. So exposure to jet engine oil fumes is in a confined space is poisonous to humans, and the effects can be deadly, as we'll learn later. So here are more events in the news. Cabin crew may be able to use portable oxygen masks if they identified the fume event in time. If the fumes do not subside after an attempt is made to diagnose and fix the problem, the flight is diverted to a nearby airport. In severe fume or smoke events, the aircraft might descend to an altitude of 10,000 feet or lower so that they can safely depressurize, and then you can get the masks.
Yeah, and actually, how many times has that ever been done?
I've never seen that. Thank goodness. Well, this was interesting here because this is a journal. This is actually an abstract that I found on nanomedicine and nanoscience research. And researchers present strong evidence for the presence of aerosol of nanoparticles, and they've defined this as ultrafine particles, UFPs, in the aerosol science, in the breathing air of pressurized aircrafts using engine air bleed air architecture. So the physical and the chemical nature of engine oils and the high temperatures attained in aircraft jet engines, and they're saying it's up to 1700 Celsius, in the oil circulation and up to 30,000 Celsius in the bearings explains why they are to be expected. So a discussion of oil seals used in gas turbine engines concludes that they permit these UFPs to cross them and enter the breathing air supply in conjunction with a complex mixture of organophosphates, which are neurotoxins. And a consideration of the toxicology of the nanoparticles concludes that their continual presence over a typical working lifetime of 20,000 hours in aircrew will predispose them to chronic respiratory problems and will also exacerbate the translocation of the neurotoxic substances across the brain barrier. So this is like in addition to the organophosphates as well. All right, so as you can see here, these are just little slides of the ultrafine particles, and you can see just how small they really are. So the suspected health effects for these ultrafine particles include mortality, lung cancer, cardiopulmonary toxicity, DNA damage, neurological disorders such as severe cognitive deficits, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, suicide, and dementia. So the big cover-up. And this attorney said the only thing filtering this toxic soup out of the cabin are the lungs of the passengers and crew. So she's an expert in aviation law, has a unique experience in the field of aviation, having studied air and space law at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Her cases are continually profiled by CNN, The Situation Room, Today, The Today Show, Le Monde, The Wall Street Journal, MSNBC, CNN, NBC, LA News, Maclean's Magazine. Her successes advocating on behalf of victims spans over 20 years, and currently airlines and governments are aware of the dangers and the risks, but provide no warnings to passengers or air crew. So this is Angel Brain's, her journey. And so Angel Brain's childhood dream was to become a stewardess. And while working in a top London spa, she saw many customers from the Middle East and Asia. She thought that work as a stewardess would give her the opportunity to learn about different cultures. And Gulf Air fulfilled her childhood dreams, but her worst nightmare became a reality. She relocated to the Gulf Air headquarters near the capital of Bahrain. She flies long-haul flights in Boeing 767s, and periodically she and her colleagues noticed very pungent smells and comparable to the smell of a wet dog or socks, which sometimes is accompanied by a light haze in the cabin. When such incidences occur, passengers are often very tired and crew members can suddenly fall asleep. And sometimes Angel was so tired on board that she could not continue to work. And in hindsight, she realized that these incidences were fume events. So Angel became progressively unwell and was treated at the Airlines hospital. And due to unsuccessful treatments and declining health, she became depressed. And her doctors believed that she was anemic and unable to cope with the pressures of work and advised her to take iron tablets. And during this time, she also suffered 2 miscarriages. Angel realized that her mind and body had hit a wall. And due to the constant inhalation of toxic fumes, she returns home to the UK. She is concerned about her declining health as she feels she is no longer physically, mentally, and emotionally as fit as she was at the start of her career. She used her own resources to find a solution and to find help, and the British doctors could not offer her any help. And in 2013, she attended a conference in London on contaminated cabin air, and she met with numerous experts, and one of them was Professor Dr. Abu Dania, a neurobiologist at Duke University, a professor of pharmacology and cancer biology, who generously offered to test her blood with using a highly specialized blood test, which confirms that she was suffering from organophosphate poisoning. And in search of a solution, she researched extensively and created a group called Flight Toxic International to raise awareness about the dangers of aerotoxic syndrome. And in addition, she was instrumentally involved in the creation of Unfiltered, Breathed In documentary. And this was a documentary that she helped to create. So that when I showed you that that was just a trailer, this is the longer version.
Watch it.
Yes, very good. And if all that wasn't bad enough, not only are you exposed to organophosphates, but you're also exposed to pesticides on aircrafts, and this is called disinsection. So what is disinsection? Well, some countries require that inbound flights be treated with pesticides to prevent the spread of insects or diseases carried by insects, like malaria or Zika. And the process of applying pesticides to kill insects, again, is called disinsection. So disinsection methods can include spraying the aircraft cabin with insecticides either before or after passengers board, or while in flight, or treating the aircraft inside the services while passengers are not on board. So, and this can actually be, these pesticides can kill for up to 8 weeks. I've actually been on flights like this where they come through the cabin, and they don't even tell you. The first time I experienced it, they didn't even tell you. They just came spraying all this stuff through the cabin. I'm like, what is that? Smelled horrible. Well, I always that always happened every time I would fly to Malaysia. And during that time, I happened to fly, every other month. And so the next time I flew, I thought, okay, I'm going to be ready. I had my scarves, I had my blankets and everything. So when they came through, they don't tell you. They don't always tell you. So I, covered up my face and everything and just wait till it, it went away. But then one time they actually told us, so everybody, was prepared so that they, could cover up. But what they're saying here in some of the information I found out was that they can actually spray the plane before you actually board. So they don't have to go through and spray while you're in the plane. So either way, you're going to get it, right?
Pick your poison.
So here's something else to think about. What about cosmic ionizing radiation? This comes from outer space. Okay, so we have very small amounts of this radiation that reaches the Earth, but at flight altitudes, passengers and crew members are actually exposed to higher levels of cosmic radiation. And so why is that important? Well, as a flight attendant, if you're pregnant or planning a pregnancy, it's important to consider your work exposure, including cosmic radiation. And for flight attendants, the NIOSH study found that exposure to 0.36 millisieverts or more of cosmic radiation in the first trimester. All right, so again, exposure to 0.36 millisieverts or more of cosmic radiation in the first trimester may be linked to increased risk of miscarriage. And, hello, what about the frequent flyer? How many women are, business women are flying all the time, right? Frequent flyers, they're pregnant, they don't even know about this. So ionizing radiation is also known to cause reproductive problems as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, and when you look at that and you think, okay, a lot of times for women that are within their first 3 months of pregnancy, how many of them don't even know?
Exactly.
And you combine that from a travel standpoint. The good part is people haven't been traveling much for the last year, but
that's true.
This just gives me chills to actually get into some of the details of it, and even knowing it and studying it from what I've done, it's still just to be able to talk through it. If this doesn't make you sick, you're not breathing. Oh.
Well, there's more. Hang on a minute. Let us play this video first.
Don't you ever, ever, ever consume these products from an airplane from a flight attendant. Rule number 1, never consume any liquid that is not in a can or a bottle. The reason being is because those water tanks are never cleaned and they are disgusting. So talk to a flight attendant. We rarely drink the coffee or tea. They come from the same water tank. And so when you're drinking that coffee and tea, it comes from that hot water and it's absolutely disgusting. So these little coffee guys, they are rarely cleaned unless they are broken. These guys are taken out and cleaned in between flights, but the whole machine is never cleaned. And they're by the lavatories. So pro tip for all you parents, never ask for hot water and put it in your baby's bottle. Ask for a bottled water on the side and hot water in a cup.
Right. So what she was making.
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, I stopped drinking that long time ago. So
don't get the ice either.
Oh yeah, no. Everything bottled water. So everything needs to be in a bottle. For parents that need to feed their baby or bottle-fed babies, only use bottled water to mix the formula, and then you can ask for hot water to put into another container so that you can put your baby's bottle in that container to heat it. You only heat with the water. Don't take it. So there was actually there's 2 studies, but the 2015 study called Bacteria That Travels, the quality of aircraft water in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found 37 species of bacteria that could be identified on board water, within onboard water. And most were natural aquatic bacteria, but 2 were not. And although the bacteria does not fall into the dangerous infectious microorganism categories, certain immunocompromised individuals, of course, are at risk. And many airlines continue to violate the federal government's aircraft drinking water rule. And the water samples continue to test positive for E. coli and coliform bacteria. I mean, how disgusting is that, right? So does this mean that you should immediately stop consuming airplane water, including in-flight coffee and tea? Oh yes, I think so. Absolutely, yes. That's what the study says. And the other thing too, I bet you guys have never thought about this, but after you use the bathroom, guess what else the study suggests that you should do? They say that you should actually use a hand sanitizer. Now, have you ever thought of that? You just go in the bathroom, people just wash their hands, and they come out and they think, oh, it's clean, right? Well, look at this list of major airlines with the dirtiest water on board, ranked from the cleanest to the dirtiest. Oh, look at number 9 and 10.
You won't find me flying on those. But I get number 5. Number 5 is my favorite.
Well, we don't have those here, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so this is the major airlines here. Let's move on to aerotoxic symptoms. But however, aerotoxic syndrome actually affects the central nervous system and the brain in particular. And so while genetic variations means that not all people suffer symptoms, the nature of the chemicals present in the contaminated air means that they can dissolve in our cell membranes. They can get into our cells and therefore penetrate every system in the body. And this can lead to a wide range of symptoms, including migraines, fatigue, difficulty thinking, aches and pains in joints and muscles, breathing problems, digestive problems, and even increased risks for breast blank for women. So I said blank because I don't like to say that other word. And of course, many women are wrongly prescribed antidepressants for their symptoms. So this is what they came up with, something called nocebo. Yeah, this is actually a word, right? This is what yeah, seriously, I couldn't believe it. And the experts are saying that there's no proof that the chemicals are causing sickness or injury, and that the levels are so low that like just being at home or in the workplace. But yet they say that they can't even be sure of a fume event, and that they say it's very rare. So they have come up with this new term called a nocebo effect, And that is that if someone smells something they think may be harmful, that in itself may cause symptoms, this is a nocebo effect. This is a bleed-free plane, bleed-free plane. This is the only exception is the Boeing 787. And I can say that I have been on a Boeing 787, the Dreamliner. Absolutely fantastic plane. I mean, the moment you walk in, you can definitely smell the difference. And the whole flight, I mean, even when you got off the flight, you were like really refreshed, and the air was, that was the first thing I noticed. Wow, the air is just so clean in this plane. It was just amazing. Well, I think also it's about having the awareness, you know, getting the word out there, letting people know, and banding together, because, you know, when people band together, the collective can make changes happen.
Are you saying that a community all driven around the same philosophy could inflict change if the community got big enough?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. We could be a movement for this cause. So these are all the areas that we've hit on, all the things that we've talked about. As you can see, we have neurological disorders. These are all the symptoms here going around. So we pretty much covered all of this here. And our last slide is going to be about tips for travel, right? So one of the things you need to do is to hydrate. And you don't hydrate the day of the flight. You actually need to hydrate several days before, okay? So that's really important, is to hydrate before. One of the little tricks that I do, instead of drinking lots of water on the plane and then you have to go to the bathroom all the time, is I just get one water bottle. What's important is that you have a good source of electrolytes, right? So because you can still, you know, be thirsty, get dehydrated, but you need electrolytes so you can keep your hydration. So I pop one of these little fizzies in a bottle and I drink that and I'm good. The other thing is that you need a high quality mask to filter out 99.6% of these particles, bacteria, viruses in the air. And of course, what gets rid of organophosphates?
What
Who
also
knew?
has trace minerals?
Exactly. Your travel buddy.
Here's another thing that is possibly forthcoming. Do you know what you should spray on your mask? Oh.
Silver.
And maybe little fragments that can bind stuff. Maybe you should put that in your little spray.
Clean slate.
Well, the floor is yours, Clayton.
Man, so we're going to hit on clean slate, but I want to hit on one other thing that goes along with this. How many people have an aversion to flying, right? A fear of flying. I married one. And so before I rant on this, just so everyone knows that the fear response and stress can be overcome. Christina has a horrific fear of flying. And she was actually in the air flying to New York on 9/11. Just to give you how her life works and an opportunity to deal with her fears. But Zero In has all but solved that. And because of the boost in dopamine and serotonin, that her aversion to flying is averted. But I mean, do you really need much more information?
So remembering some of the special people, the casualties of aerotoxic syndrome,